What we're going to be reviewing this morning is lighteners and toners. So far we have been dealing with the addition of color. Now we're going to deal with the removal of color and the different products we're going to use. Our next unit, I think, is products and formulations, so I'm going to go through some of that as we go through our lecture today so you'll understand what's what. Lighteners themselves are the chemical compounds that lighten hair by dispersing, dissolving, and decolorizing the natural hair pigment. Y'all remember our little pictures of the fine hair and the pigment molecules? We said like 20, and then the medium hair with it. What we're going to do is go in and attack those melanin molecules and disperse them. We're not really getting rid of them. We're just breaking them down so they're so much smaller that you can't see them. So remember that when it talks about actually removing, we're not going to remove. As soon as hydrogen peroxide is mixed into the lightener formula, it begins to release oxygen. This process, known as oxidation, occurs within the cortex of the hair shaft, and hydrogen peroxide is your lightening agent. Y'all remember that? All right. Hair lighteners are used to create a blonde shade that is not achievable with permanent hair color. All right. How many levels can we lift with permanent hair color? 4. So if we've got a client that's got a 4 level and wants to go to a 9, then we've got to use a lightening agent. Hair lighteners will also lighten the hair prior to application of a color to create the final color. That's where toners come in. Toners are aniline derivative tints or permanent hair colors, but they only come in pale, delicate shades. And I brought some out, a color swatch, to show you what we're talking about with pale, delicate shades. And that would be on this side of our color swatches. Always pale, delicate shades. So that means your blondes or your platinums or whatever. That's toners. We also now, and this was never done when I was training, we also now have the reds that we have to lighten the hair for before we deposit the reds. You see these bright reds? Some of them look kind of orangey to me. They're kind of copper, according to which shade you're looking at. This one's copper red, and that's red. So if we've got real dark hair, we're going to have to remove some of that darkness before we get this brightness. So the others was toning with pale, delicate colors, and this is applying a tint rather than a toner after we've lightened. We may also use hair lighteners to lighten hair to a particular shade. Certain individuals, when we lighten their hair, that product will pull it on up to the shade or tone they like. And this is why I brought several different types of lighteners out that we're going to discuss and look at in a few minutes to help achieve that, because normal healthy hair will only go through 2 chemical processes. And that's what we're going to have to remember about the question y'all were asking me before the lecture. If we've got a relaxer on there and we've got to use a lightener, that is your 2 chemical processes. But we are discussing normal healthy hair and 2 chemical processes. So if we've got kind of resistant hair, then you can probably get by with going ahead and putting the 3rd chemical on there. But if you see a little bit of damage after that first one, then you're going to be in trouble if you head for number 3. Hair lighteners may be used to brighten or lighten an existing shade. They may be used to lighten only certain parts of the hair, like we do in highlighting or foiling. And they may be used to lighten dark, natural, or color-treated levels. I do not like to use them for the removal of artificial colors because it's not usually successful. It usually leaves us at an ugly green or an ugly orange and will not take us any further. So it's best to use a color remover product. The decolorizing process. The hair goes through different stages of color as it lightens. Do y'all remember the underlying pigment? Okay, that's what we're going to be looking at. That's the first thing we're going to look at. The amount of change depends on how much pigment the hair has, the strength of that lightening product, and the length of time that it is processed. During the process of decolorizing, natural hair can go through as many as 10 stages. And I want y'all to look at the 10 degrees of decolorization. But the reason all hair cannot go through those 10 degrees of decolorization is because all of them don't start with 1. We've got to decide where we're starting on this level to know how many we go through. If we're starting up here at 5, then there's no way to go through 10 levels because there's not 10 left. You see what we're talking about? But dark black hair, true black, can go through all 10 if we're going to take it from 1 through 10. Take it to pale yellow. That's usually not a wise thing to do. You need to be really careful if you're going to go through more than 4 or 5 levels because you've got to get a really strong chemical to do so. Decolorizing the hair's natural melanin pigment allows the colorist to create the exact degree of contributing pigment needed for the final result. Do y'all understand what that means? Decolorizing the hair's natural melanin pigment allows the colorist to create the exact degree of contributing pigment needed for the final result. Does that sound a little confusing? All right. If we want a really light blonde, and we've got, say, medium brown hair, we've got to pre-lighten it to pale yellow in order to achieve this. We lighten it to pale yellow and then apply a toner on it to achieve this pale blonde. But if we only wanted to go to this light blonde with that same medium brown hair, we would not have to go all the way up to the pale yellow stage. We could stop like at the gold stage at level 7 instead of going to level 10. So what that means is different colors require different contributing factors being left in the hair, or contributing pigment, excuse me. All right, let's assume we were going to use red. Let's assume we're going to use this copper red. What level could we highlight to from the medium brown hair? We can probably stop at number 5, orange, if that's it goes. So that's what it means to stop at the amount of contributing pigment. We could take it on to pale yellow and it would work too, but why would we want to go that far when we don't have to?
So we would, okay, when we're in our highlighting, instead of putting that chemical on there for 20 minutes, like it would say, if we say we wanted to highlight mine like I used to do and I'd go all the way up to the blonde, I would not leave it on there as long.
You're going to check it. And I think as we read the directions on these, I think you're going to find that they'll say something like after 35 minutes, if you've not reached the level you want to, reapply the product. So time limit's not a big thing on this as it is with permanent waving. Because as it gives up its oxygen, remember this is oxidation from the get-go when we mix it with hydrogen peroxide. That hydrogen peroxide is going to give up its oxygen relatively quickly. And if we've not reached the amount of contributing pigment we want or got as light as we want to, then we're probably going to need to reapply so we've got fresh oxidation occurring on there. Okay. But this is what it's talking about with stopping it at the correct amount of contributing pigment.
So we just stop. We go ahead and
remove it if it's reached that, yes. Naturally, the lower number you're wanting to achieve, like if you're wanting to achieve, you're going to get to 5 quicker than you are to 10, unless you're starting out with mighty light hair. Yeah. The natural pigment that remains in the hair contributes to the artificial color that's added. So see, that's why we wouldn't want to leave it at orange when we're wanting this real pale blonde. Yeah. Lightening the hair to the correct stage is essential to a beautiful, controlled final hair coloring result. Let me explain another thing to you about taking it to pale yellow while we're here. When we add artificial color to the hair, whether it's the bright red, the blonde toner, or black as in hair coloring, if we do not leave enough of the natural melanin in there, the granules. The artificial color has nothing to attach to, and that's what makes it fade so much more quickly. So you never want to lighten past the pale yellow, because to take it past the pale yellow, those little granules are dispersed so much that the artificial pigments have nothing to attach to. So they're not going to hold.
They don't have anything to grab, kind of?
They don't have anything to grab. That's exactly right. And if there's nothing for us to hold on to, or for them to hold on to, then, you know, you may see a little difference today, and the first time you shampoo it, it's out the door, down the drain, because there was nothing in there to hold it. Toners are semi-permanent, demi-permanent, and permanent hair color products that are used primarily on pre-lightened hair to achieve pale and delicate colors. They are applied to the lightest degree of contributing pigment that remains there after the decolorizing process. And the reason that's an important statement, because if you're wanting to go to a iridescent blonde or white blonde, and you've stopped at 6, which would be orange gold, or 7, which is gold, you're not going to get there, because that toner does not have the chemical capabilities of taking that hair where it wants to go. So it's vitally important that you know where you're going before you start on your trip. You know, and don't just decide we'll lighten now and then decide what we want. It don't work that way. We got to know exactly what's going on. Not all hair will go through all 10 degrees of decolorization. Each natural hair color starts the decolorization process at a different stage. Remember, the goal is to create the correct degree of contributing pigment as the foundation for the final hair color result. And this goes back to our rule that it's not as simple as going back there and choosing a color and making a formula for it. We've got to consider the hair color that we're applying it to as part of our formula. The hair is never safely lifted past the pale yellow stage to white with a lightener. The extreme diffusion of color necessary to give hair a white appearance causes excessive damage to the hair strand. The result is that wet hair feels mushy and will stretch without returning to its original length. Do y'all remember when we were studying about elasticity, and I told you that one sure way to tell when the elasticity was gone from the hair is when you wet it. If it feels like wet cotton instead of strands of hair, then all elasticity is gone, and it's just a matter of time before you put that hair in the trash can, because it's coming off. There's no stretch left there. And that's what they're talking about with it mushy, is that cottony. We always called it cottoning. The result is that wet hair feels mushy and will stretch without returning to its original length. When dry, the hair is harsh and brittle. Such hair often suffers breakage and will not accept a toner properly. This is when it stains it or turns it the lavender or the gunmetal gray or some other desirable, because it just grabs the base color in the toner, or the base color stains it, because it is like cotton instead of hair. This does not mean that only those born with blonde hair can be white blondes. The baby blonde look can be achieved by lightening to pale yellow and then neutralizing the unwanted undertone or contributing pigment with a toner. And that means when we get to pale yellow, we know we've got to cut the yellow. So what's directly across from the yellow on the color wheel? Or across from the gold? The purple. So we're going to use a toner that has a base color of violet.